There was a resort in Oman where we were living in the Middle East, and it was like 10,000 points a night. It wasn't just like 10 nights. It was like 12 or 13 because you just earned so many points by staying there. And my wife was like, I don't want to go to a resort in Oman for 2 weeks. And I was like, all right, fair enough.
But we can pay for it with points. Like, how cool is that? I'm not going to that resort.
Yeah, she's like, that sounds like prison.
Welcome to the Military Money Manual Podcast, where every episode is all about achieving financial independence in the military faster than before. We believe personal finance shouldn't be boring or intimidating. Building wealth can be simple, and financial freedom is the ultimate financial goal. Now, here's your hosts, Spencer and Jamie.
On today's episode, we're going to talk with one of our listeners, Brian, who's an Air Force member stationed in Washington, D.C., and he is going to share some travel hacking success stories from his honeymoon and some other things that he's learned about newlywed finances, combining finances, travel hacking, and things like that in today's episode. So we're very excited to have this in detail. It's going to be a little nerdy on the travel hacking side, but I think it'll be really inspirational to hear that some of this stuff does work. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time and a little bit of research, but there are a lot of ways to make points and miles work for you as a military service member. So Brian, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So Brian, we'll start off with just like a little bit of your background. So what are you doing right now? What have you done previously? What's been kind of your military career up to this point?
Once again, thanks for having me. Really excited, long-time listener, giving your book to a couple different people and suggest to you guys. So current MAF warrior, as they say. Yeah, I'm a pilot in the Air Force. And so I think as you guys have mentioned on your podcast, you talk about certain things that cruise when you're crossing the ocean, you know, one of them personal finance, credit card hacking, real estate, or something like that. I once had a crew member say, all pilots are the same. You know, you guys talk about three things that cruise. It's either real estate, where you went to school, or pilot training. And so I laughed about that. And I was like, yeah,
not wrong.
Yeah, not wrong at all. But I do like that your podcast applies to a bunch of different military members, all ranks, all sizes. But a little bit about myself. Commissioned, went to flight school or pod training, was stationed over in Europe. That's part of my story here. Travel hacking a little bit too, which was a little bit unique. And then got stationed stateside and got engaged when I was up in the Northwest, Fairchild Air Force Base. And then during that time, really started to, over a couple deployments, research how to take a awesome honeymoon. Because, you know, you see on Instagram, like, I flew first class for $10. And you're like, no way that's true. Like, I got to research this. And again, lots of times at cruise, lots of time in the chow hall or what have you, or on TDY, and just asking people how they did things. And then went way too deep into points transfer and all the things, to the point where my fiance was like, all right, I really don't even care where we're going now. Just tell me where we're going. So
it's like, okay, I'd like to spend some time with my fiance, get off the spreadsheets. And
pretty much, yeah, it was like, you know, I'd run up the stairs and be like, what do you think about if we connected in said random, you know, European city on our way to? She's like, Brian, we're not. The honeymoon is where we're going, not how we're getting there.
Right.
Which is pretty funny. But yeah, so again, background, normal MAF warrior, as they say, got into it because of the benefits, right? Like you guys always say, the benefits that we have in terms of military members and credit cards and not paying the annual fees is just absolutely amazing, right? So you can really take advantage of it. And someone suggested your podcast and listened to it and took a lot of good things and watched a lot of YouTube videos and did my own research and got some tips, got some things I wouldn't do again, things I would do again. So I'm an open book for you guys.
Awesome. Yeah, great. We're going to get to your honeymoon, which I think was like one of the original reasons you reached out was you sent us this extremely detailed honeymoon trip breakdown, which I'm going to be honest, the first time I got it, I'm like, I'm not reading this, man. And then I went back a couple of weeks later and I was like, this is good. This is really good stuff.
What's that thing? Too long didn't read, TLDR or whatever. Yeah.
Definitely a TLDR moment where I was like, man, this is in depth, but it was good stuff in there. So I wanted to get you on the podcast to share it. And I do thank you for reaching out. What was I want to go back a little bit. What was kind of your upbringing with credit cards? Did you come from like a Dave Ramsey, no credit card family? Or Like, did you have a credit card in college? Like, what was your first credit card? I guess is a good place to start.
First credit card was, Air Force officer was the USAA Visa, I think, while I was at school, after I got the loan. I think the reason I did that one was just because my parents said, oh yeah, we have a USA one and we sometimes buy plane tickets with it. Like every couple of years we can afford one plane ticket. And I'm like, oh, that's great. That was the first one. And then commission, did the whole flight school thing, went to UPT. And I mean, during that, again, you talk to everyone and, different folks, different like, oh, have you heard about this? Oh, this credit card's great. Oh, I'm traveling back. I did the lounge. Like, wait, how do you have access to the lounge? What is that? And it's all kind of word of mouth. I would say my first credit card was the Amex Platinum, the first luxury one, which is a little bit ridiculous to say. Like when I say that to people that aren't in the military, like, oh yeah, my first credit card was real credit card was an Amex Platinum. And everyone's like, what? That's like, but then you have to explain the no fees. So yeah, after flight school, right before I did, my PIQ, as they call it, initial qual for my first plane, I got the Amex Platinum because I was moving out of the dorms and was going to have a bunch of expenses and could do the whole initial spend or whatever it was back in 2016. So yeah, I was like, I might as well try it. It worked out, but I do have a little bit of advice if someone was in my situation again. But yeah, that was my first experience with it and didn't really get back into it until 3 or 4 years after that, knowing that I was going to pay for a wedding and a honeymoon and was watching travel Instagrammers travel first class for no money. And I was like, that's not real. So that's when I got back into it for sure.
Yeah. What's that advice? You can go ahead and share that now.
Okay. So my first assignment was overseas. My advice to anyone being stationed overseas is don't do the Amex credit card game right away. Go with the Chase because that's Visa, right? And Amex isn't necessarily accepted everywhere like it is in the States. So I ran into the problem where I was a single lieutenant, living his best life, going out to eat more than I should and traveling and stuff. And most people, I was like, oh, can I use my Amex Platinum? And they're like, no, we don't take Amex. And so I ended up using my USA Visa way more than I was expecting. And I just wasn't getting the return on investment or the points that I could have with the people that actually had the Chase Sapphire, this preferred. So if you're going overseas and you want to play the credit card game, I would say go with Chase strictly because of the Visa aspect of it. I missed out on a chance, I guess. A little bit of FOMO there.
Yeah, exactly. A little bit of FOMO. I mean, you could have optimized it a little bit more, but hey, I mean, you still had lounge access, right, with the Amex Platinum.
Which is great. And I was in and out of London all the time because I was in the UK, so great lounges.
So I just had a airman or a sailor reach out from Japan, and they said, hey, I'm overseas. I'm trying to get into the credit card hobby, and where should I start? What if I'm not interested in travel and hotels? And I'm like, first of all, you should be. And second of all, because you're living in Japan. But second of all, start with a Chase Freedom Flex or Chase Freedom Unlimited to get into the Chase ecosystem, and then quickly move on to the Chase Sapphire Reserve. And oh, by the way, you can go back and you can upgrade the Chase Freedom Flex or the Chase Freedom Unlimited to another Chase Sapphire Reserve after 1 year, which is a little loophole that not a lot of people know about. So you can actually collect multiple Chase Sapphire Reserves, and you're still getting the annual fees waived on all of them under the Military Lending Act, which is pretty crazy.
Again, my friends that got the Chase beforehand definitely lucked out. I will say I have seen where the Chase kind of bites people, and it's not the case anymore. They just allowed the Military Lending Act Chase 5 or 6 years ago or 7 years ago. Like they used to not waive the fees, right?
2017, I want to say, was the date.
Right.
They switched from kind of a SCRA to implementing the Military Lending Act fully.
Correct. Yeah. So I know some people, my contemporaries, kind of got bit with that because they bit the bullet and were like, well, it's such a good credit card. It had so many benefits. We're going to just pay the fee. But then they won't go back on their word. Like they won't retroactively give you MLA benefits, as well as if you are like, okay, well, I want the MLA, but I don't want to pay it. It said, well, you have to not have a Chase credit card for, I think it's 3 years, or the Chase Sapphire, whatever one you're trying to get, you can't have it for 3 years before you can get it again. So
yeah,
my advice would be, if you are in like a weird situation where you have a reserve or a preferred and you are paying the fees because of, a previous life or whatever it is, realize that there might be some lag time before you can get the full benefits. So just do your research on that and don't get bit.
Yeah, the loophole is, so I actually opened my card when it was first launched because I had a 100,000 point bonus in 2015, I think, and I paid the annual fee on it. But when they started waiving the annual fees on it, I had my wife open up a card. She got the annual fees waived. I closed my account, added myself as a authorized user.
And waited your 3 years. Is it 3?
4. It's 48 months. I waited until the 49th month. And that's only, you can reapply for the card. You just won't be eligible for the welcome bonus.
Correct. Yes.
If you wait 48 months, then you're eligible for a new welcome bonus. You just won't have, 4 years means you're missing out on 4 years of that $300 annual travel credit, which is $1,200. That's, that's significant. So, yeah. But no, that's an excellent tip. If you're going overseas, definitely recommend looking at the Chase cards first, because you're on the Visa payment network, which is, despite what American Express marketing will have you believe, it is way more accepted overseas than Visa is.
And I will say, also traveling overseas, when I was stationed overseas, you take so many trains and buses compared to the States. And that's another thing that goes with that Chase travel credit, because they categorize any train or bus or ferry or anything like that as travel. And so you can get the multiplier there. That's definitely, I think that was on my lesson learned number 1. If you're going to be stationed overseas, go with the Chase or some sort of Visa first before Amex.
So then you started looking at your honeymoon planning, and how did you tackle that huge problem set? Did you pick a destination, or were you trying to maximize your flight options or maximize hotels? How did you even start that process?
Whenever I explain to people how I did it or how we did it, my wife and I, they're always like, what are you talking about? You could only go to Hilton properties. That makes no sense. So I got a new assignment in 2021 and got engaged in 2021 as well. And so summer of 2021, got the new assignment, got engaged in fall of 2021, but wasn't going to move until January 2022. So I had 6 months to really figure out how we were going to do this, as well as we knew we weren't going to get married until 2023. We had a bit of time, which is different than a lot of military couples, right? Most people are like, oh yeah, I was home for 1 week from leave and we got married at the courthouse and now we're here. But luckily, again, very fortunate that my wife and I had a year to plan this wedding, which also gave me a year to plan the honeymoon and how are you going to do this. So the first step was getting the new assignment. So my new assignment was DC. With the new assignment, as all military members know, a PCS incurs a lot of expenses, front loaded, right? Yes, you can, and that's a whole game, as I saw you guys had on your podcast as well, how to PCS, how to do the Diddy moves, how to make money on PCS, how to lose money on PCS, I guess. But I knew we were gonna have a lot of expenses up front. Additionally, with this new assignment came about a month of training that wasn't going to be on base. And I knew we were going to be staying in hotels. And so that was another very fortunate thing, right? That hey, pick your hotel as long as it's in the military rate, you're going to stay there a month. So I knew I was going to be able to rack up some points, loyalty points that way. Fast forward, we're about to start looking at the wedding, right? And start seeing how much weddings cost nowadays, which is a whole other conversation. And again, fortunate enough that we could really pick and choose expense-wise how we were going to do it. And I said to my then fiance, I said, hey, if we want to take a honeymoon, we can travel hack this, because look at all these expenses and you'll get, wedding money. And we knew we were going to have some of that, but we knew it was going to be front loaded. And so I said, we can get this bonus very quickly. Plus with my training that I'm going to go to while we're engaged, we should get a credit card, and then we can decide whether we want to use it for airfare or stays or what have you. And she obliged, because she's the best, humored my weird obsession that became an obsession for the next year, I would say. And so everything hey, I need to buy flights to go home to look at something with my mom. Great, put it on this credit card. and we decided on the Hilton Aspire, mostly because I knew I was going to be staying at a Hilton property for training. And I listened to your guys' podcast, talked with some other people, and the job that I was going to, we weren't necessarily going to be staying at bases all the time when we were TUI. And so was talking to them like, hey, what's the corporate knowledge that people do with credit cards and where they stay? And everyone's like, well, we usually stay at these three. So either IHG, Marriott, or Hilton is where we usually end up staying when we're TUI. So listen to your podcast, read a lot of The Points Guy, read a lot of, military wallet blogs, and the free night with the Hilton Aspire was what got me, as well as the sign-on bonus, as well as the top tier. Just having the card made you a diamond member, where the Marriott one, I don't know the specifics. You guys definitely do because you're the professionals, right? Like if you have the Amex Marriott, or you're not the top Marriott tier. So went with Hilton, reserved my room at the Hilton for the next month while I was at training, paid for anything and everything that had to do with the wedding and PCS, you name it. In 6 months, we were PCSing, we were getting married. There was a ton of expenses, which was kind of stressful, but also like awesome that we knew we were going to hit that bonus right away. Therefore, we could then look at like, okay, this is how many points we have. How does that translate to a honeymoon? So, Jamie, to answer your question, first it was a card, got the bonus, realized how much the bonus was, then finished the month long of training. Once those points hit, then we really realized how many Hilton points we had, which I think in my write-up there, it was like 600,000 Hilton points or so. Basically from there, spent, I would say probably, it was like constant. You know how if you're buying a house or trying to rent a house or a car or buy a car, like you're always on Zillow or Car Trader, like looking up things, Well, mine was, where are the Hilton properties in the world? Constantly on the Hilton app looking. My goal was I want to stay for free on my honeymoon, and I wanted a private, like you see on Instagram, like the bungalows with the walk-in pool and stuff. And
And you got it. It worked.
I did. Yeah, we did. And I also really wanted to see if I could fly first class transatlantic or across the ocean, because I'd never done that. And I knew it could be done because you see it. I heard you guys talk about it all the time, right? And I was like, surely this can happen, right? And so unfortunately, we didn't get that part, but that's only because we had to put together like 4 legs. But yeah, it all worked out. And I was pretty proud of myself. And it was like, that meme where all the numbers are running through the guy's head. I think it's The Hangover, right? With Zach Galifianakis. I felt like that. I was down in the basement, like, hey, can I have your United number? And like yelling up the stairs, like, is it okay if I sign you up for Avianca airline or Life Miles? And she's like, what is Avianca? Like, what is that? And I'm like, it's a Colombian airline, but we can transfer. It's gonna be fine. And her mom was over it. So my mother-in-law was like, what are you guys doing? I think we can go to Tahiti. Do you want to go to Tahiti? And so we ended up going to Tahiti, but originally we really wanted to go to Portugal because after a deployment, Portugal, we had all it paid for and everything. Then COVID hit and I got stuck deployed like a lot of military members did. So then our PMCR, as they call it, or downtime, every service calls it something different, right? Yeah. We couldn't go to Portugal then back in 2020. And so we're like, we're going to Portugal for our honeymoon. But after looking at all the timeline and everything, it didn't work out. So then we pivoted and started looking at the Caribbean and all inclusive. And it was a whole process.
Just a quick note from one of our sponsors, and we'll be right back to the show. Hey, Spencer, I've heard about this free Amex Platinum card for military service members. Where can I go to learn more about this?
Great question, Jamie. I've got the Ultimate Military Credit Cards course at militarymoneymanual.com/UMC3. It's a 100% free email-based course, and I explain exactly how to verify your eligibility for credit card annual fee waivers with the Military Lending Act, or MLA, and the Service Member Civil Relief Act, or SCRA. The Ultimate Military Credit Cards course is a beginner's guide to travel hacking and opening up your first annual fee-waived credit card while you or your spouse serves in the U.S. military. There's no spam, no fluff. And the only emails you'll get from me are related to military credit cards. You can unsubscribe at any time, and there's zero cost to you to sign up. You can sign up right now for free at militarymoneymanual.com/UMC3. Again, militarymoneymanual.com/uniform Mike Charlie 3.
And now back to the show. Yeah, so I want to dig in on the flights first. So as you're looking at flights, you mentioned that you ended up transferring some of your points. We've talked about that on previous episodes, but basically the gist is you can take your transferable, flexible points like Amex or Chase, you can transfer them to a partner airline like Avianca, and then you can buy, which airline did you buy? You said United, I think?
Yes, the Points Guy app was an awesome app. We were flying from Houston because that's where our wedding was. I typed in Houston, and I did so many iterations of things. So finally we landed on Tahiti. So Houston to Tahiti, which is Papeete, right? Or FAA, FA''A. You put the route into the Points Guy, and it will spit out, if you load all your cards and points in there, it will give you a little bit of game plan on what points you should use for what route. And so it said, hey, ANA partners with United, you can use your X number of Amex points, transfer to Air Nippon Airways, and it did it for all the airlines. So then I found out, okay, United flies from SFO to Papeete. I knew I had to go from SFO to Papeete on United because that's really the only people. Delta also flew to Papeete from LA and Seattle, and I looked at those two, but I had the most Chase points and United points. And so I needed some way to get Amex points to my United account because Chase transfers to United, but Amex does not transfer to United. So I needed a third party. And the Points Guy was really helpful with that. The app showed me like 3 or 4 different companies that were One World partners, and you could then reserve reward flights, United reward flights through those partners.
So when you're looking in that filter, does it show you by date of what days are available? How did you actually find which flights are available on United? Because sometimes, especially reward flights, and especially reward flights in business class or a lie flat seat, are a challenge to find without some kind of paid service.
That was kind of another search that I had to do because I knew that I had to fly United, but I also knew that somehow I needed to get these United points. And so I looked at Air Canada. What would Air Canada business class be to fly on a United flight, but like reserved through Air Canada? This actually comes to my second point of lessons learned. If you want to see what award flights are for every one, you have to become a member of their frequent flyer enterprise, right? And so for Avianca Airways, you have to become a Life Miles member. And that's literally just putting in your email and a password, and then you get a frequent flyer member number. I did the same thing for ANA, Singapore Airlines, Air Canada. Like I did them all just to see their reward offerings. And so once you become that, then you can sign in, you can see reward offerings, and then from there, see if your points from the credit card will then transfer to that.
Yeah. It's not like you have to put in credit card information with all the airlines that you're searching for. It's just your email and sign up information. So, yeah. I mean, I guess your address and your email are out there, but it's not like you're having to submit credit card information to all these airlines. There are some tools maybe we can talk about in a future episode to help make that a little bit easier, but a lot of times it's just doing some legwork. So if you're flexible on the dates, you're flexible on the airlines, or like, let's say you're stationed in the Northeast or in DC for you, now you can look at Dulles, you can look at Reagan, you can look at BWI. And then maybe if there's a really good deal, you take a train up to JFK and spend the night there and then start out at JFK the next day. So it definitely gets really complicated very fast.
That's a really good point. I would caution or implore everyone to become frequent flyer miles members of every airline that you can think of. If you think that you would fly it one day to travel, get your reward number. Otherwise, you'll have no access to even seeing these flights that are available. I've met, young air crew. They're like, I get assigned a flight through DTS and then I'm good. I'm like, oh, well, put your card in or put your number in there, your United number, your American Airlines number. I'm like, oh, well, I don't know. I only fly it like when I'm PDY. I'm like, oh my God, dude, like, I don't want to like shake them. Like, no, dude, like, you don't understand. Get a membership. And so then you can start accruing all of these miles. And then there's no way to transfer. You can have all these super sexy credit cards with all of these points that you guys talk about, but if you have no way to then put them in an account, then it does no good.
Yeah, I have so many random airlines that I've never actually flown on, but I have a frequent flyer number with them. The funny thing is like sometimes I'll fly an airline and I'll like add my booking, to the app, and I'll be like, you have 10,000 points. And I was like, since when? And it's because 10 years ago, I flew them and I signed up for a frequent flyer number. And so I've got the points in there. Sometimes like some of these airlines, like Singapore Airlines, I don't think I've ever purchased a cash flight from them. And I always have so many miles left over in there because, okay, I'm waitlisting this, then I'm buying this one. Then, I'm moving this around. I'm upgrading to first class. I'm downgrading to business class. You just have miles like scattered all over the place. And there's a couple apps where you can kind of like combine them all and like see what you got. I just keep a spreadsheet of like in general, like I know I have X number of points over here and Y number of points over there.
Another one is Flying Blue, I think it's KLM, and I've never flown them, but every time I go overseas, I'm always looking. And I guess my strategy is I only transfer points when I know I'm going to use them. And yes, there's some leftover and stuff, but it's to the point where I'm like, we'll just take that as a wash, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you can have my 1,000 Flying Blue points or LATAM airline points if you want them. I'll figure it out later.
The most frustrating experience is a couple months ago, I saw first class availability on Emirates. I moved the points over. I went to make the booking and they were gone. And like within like 5 minutes. And I was like, God, and I like called customer service and they're like, nope, someone like just snapped them up like 4 minutes ago. And I missed them by that much. And it doesn't happen often. Like usually it's not that quick, but it is frustrating because once you move the points to a partner, they're stuck. They will not reverse them come hell or high water.
When I was transferring points from my Amex to Avianca in order to get those United flights from SFO to Pepite, I was like to my wife, I was like, hey, are you cool if I transfer, X number of points from our Amex to that? And she's like, I mean, that's a lot, but are we going to be able to get it? And I was like, well, this is my first time trying it. So we're either going to Tahiti or we're going to have a lot of Avianca points.
We're going to Colombia.
Yeah. Not bad, but there's no Hilton in Colombia that we wanted to go to. I do want to put it out there, disclaimer. I did have to pay for some of this honeymoon. So all the listeners, I don't want anyone to think that like, oh, he did this all on points. But it was significantly cheaper. And I think in my write-up, I did the math, what it would cost if we did the whole thing on cash, both hotel and flights. I think it was like $3,000 compared to almost $10,000 if we paid in cash. I don't want someone to think I'm, an Instagram traveler influencer that doesn't give you the full story. So that's my disclaimer.
Yeah. And I think that's really good of you. And that's something that sometimes people get into the hobby and they're like, oh, I'm going to be flying, all these whenever I want, in Emirates first class. And it's like, well, no, first of all, like Emirates only flies certain routes. So like if you're flying from like New York to LA, like it's got to be an American airline, United, Delta, Southwest, and you said this in your write-up that you sent to us, like, the Instagrammers, when you follow them, you're like, wow, this is amazing. And then you start like looking into like the actual like details of it. And it's like, when you're trying to book these dream redemptions, you don't have a lot of control over when you do it. Sometimes you don't have a lot of control over where you're going. So if you have an actual, like destination in mind, like I want to go to Tahiti on these dates, that can be very limiting. And you can quickly realize that that's just not going to work in business class because there's not that much availability. And I think that's why, the super flexible like Chase Ultimate Reward points are so valuable because you can just go into the portal, the Chase Travel portal, and you can book at 1.5 cents per point if you have the Chase Sapphire Reserve, and you can book any flight you want, any hotel you want, and it's just done. And you don't have to worry about transferring points. And just recently, I booked a Qantas flight for me and my wife, and it was like $9,000 round trip. And I was like, not paying cash for that. That's insane. But I had 600,000 Chase Ultimate Reward points. And so, boom, just cash those in. And is that the best redemption? There's definitely people out there who are like, no, you could have transferred it to this and that and that. It's like, yeah, I could have. But guess what? Come October, when I take that flight, I didn't pay anything for it. Yes, technically points have value, but we know by saving that $9,000, I can now max out my Roth IRA for the year and put $2,000 in my wife's as well. So it's pretty amazing, what the flexible points, the opportunities they open up, because sometimes there is restricted availability, and that's something that you addressed in the email you sent us.
You might not be able to get the best airfare redemption and the best hotel redemption at the same time. So a lot of times it's good to pick one or the other. And I know on your hotel, you mentioned having the Hilton card. And so you had a balance of free night certificates and some points and some cash, I think you said too. So how did that work once you found the hotel? You got the Overwater bungalow. How did you travel hack the hotel piece of it?
If you're on a timetable, I think travel hacking and thinking you're going to fly first class when you only have a week of leave and you want to go to the Maldives, it's not going to happen. You really got to know your timeline. And we ran into that when we were doing this epic honeymoon, like, hey, because both of us work full time and I had 7 days of leave and my wife, was in between contracts and stuff. So she was a little more flexible, but we knew we could only travel on like these 9 days. So going and waiting for the best reward was just not going to happen, which I didn't realize that the airlines differentiate where they put the best rewards. And if you wait, you can get better ones, but that's a lesson learned as well. To Jamie's question, I would say the biggest one was I knew we had 5 nights to be in a hotel. So September 19th through the 23rd, we were like, all right, we're going to be in Tahiti. But Tahiti's an island nation, or French Polynesia, right? And so you fly into Pete, but then the next day, then you can go to your next island destination. And so, well, where are we going to stay that one night? There's a Hilton Hotel Tahiti in the capital. And so I knew September 19th, we were going to be in a hotel. And then September 20th through the 22nd, I was going to be in the Hilton Moorea Lagoon Resort and Spa, the bungalow over the water.
Nice.
That I saw online and that my wife and I wanted to do. But then I knew I had to be back to DC on the 24th. So then we had to travel back to the mainland and then from there fly back to SFO all the way back to DC. So to answer Jamie's question, I only had enough points for like 3 nights or something. So the first night I used 170,000 Hilton points to stay our night in the capital, and that was on points. The next day, we then took a ferry to the Hilton Moorea Lagoon Resort and Spa, and that was 415 Hilton points plus a cash night, and that wiped out our Hilton points. But we still had to have a night in the capital on the way back. So then that's when I used my free night that I was banking on because I had the Hilton Aspire card. We used that free night to stay our last night in Tahiti in the capital before we flew out the next morning back to the States. Another lesson learned that I didn't realize was going to be it was that free Hilton night on the Aspire card is a basic room only. If the hotel you're trying to stay at is a basic room or doesn't have any basic rooms, then you can't use that free Hilton night there. And that happened to us at the Hilton Moorea. I was like, oh, well, of course I'm going to use my free night at the more expensive over bungalow water hotel, but they're like, well, there's no more standard rooms available, so you can't use it. I was like, oh my God.
My whole plan's falling apart.
I know.
Did you have issues combining? So you use like free night certificate, some points, some like was customer service able to help you merge it all into one reservation without having to move rooms or anything like that?
Because we made it at the same property, we're in the same room the whole time. And another thing I'll employ, shout out to the Aspire card, because that makes you a diamond member. Yes, if you do your free night in a basic room, and we've looked at amazing hotels, in London and New York and all these places just for one night, their basic room, because you're a diamond member, they'll upgrade you because you have the card, right? So yes, you reserve the basic night through your free night, but because of your status, usually you will get upgraded, which actually happened to us in Tahiti. So our basic room turned into an over or a 2-room suite with a balcony over the harbor, even though it was reserved as a basic room. So another floor for the Hilton Aspire card, I would say.
Yeah, I don't know if I would want to go all the way to Tahiti and risk it booking a standard room on the beach, or it's like it's still a nice resort. But if I'm going to go all the way there hoping for an overwater bungalow, I'm not going to risk it. I don't think on a potential to get it upgraded. But the other thing that's nice is if you redeem either points, if you were to save up a bunch of points, 4th night, and you get the 5th night free, That's another strategy I've seen a lot of people use for big redemptions like the honeymoon with Hilton.
Another lesson learned was I was expecting to get so many United frequent flyer miles on this trip because we were flying from Houston to SFO to Pete back all the way to Washington, D.C. But if you book reward travel, you don't get credit for those trips on your frequent flyer miles. And so that was kind of a sobering thought. I really thought I was going to like double dip, but it didn't happen. So that's another one of my lessons learned I put in the write-up. Like, don't be mad if you don't get credit for them.
I will say though, sometimes I stay at like super cheap Hiltons and there'll be like a promo going on where like every time you check in as a Diamond member, you know, they'll give you like 1,000 points,
Yep.
you know, per check-in or whatever. I can't remember. This is a little bit ago before, you know, Hilton points got more and more devalued, but there was a resort in Oman where we were living in the Middle East and it was like 10,000 points a night. And I figured out that like you could go and stay there for like 100,000 points. It wasn't just like 10 nights. It was like 12 or 13 because you just earned so many points by staying there.
That's great.
Yeah. So that was, and my wife was like, I don't want to go to a resort in Oman for 2 weeks. And I was like, all right, fair enough.
But we can pay for it with points. Like, how cool is that? You know, like, I'm not going to that resort.
Yeah. She's like, that sounds like prison. And I was like,
I was wondering which cheap Hilton resort Spencer stayed at in his past. It makes sense that was a few years ago. But just a quick note from one of our sponsors, and we'll be right back to the show. Don't know an IRA from a TSP or an SCRA from a CZTE? Fear not, the Military Money Manual, a practical guide to financial freedom, is here to help. In this concise, no-nonsense guide, our very own Spencer Reese, founder of the popular personal finance site, militarymoneymanual.com, offers invaluable tips and tricks to help service members of all ranks, branches, and bank account levels gain financial independence. Along with laying out the fundamentals of building wealth while serving, the book explains how to take maximum advantage of the unique financial perks available only to service members, whether active duty or reserve, officer, or enlisted. These benefits include special tax-deferred savings plans, preferential bank loans, fee waivers on high-end credit cards, and much, much more. Personal finance is not boring or intimidating. With its candid and accessible tone, this book feels like having a beer with a good and financial savvy friend. So pull up a chair, get comfortable, and learn how to make your military money work for you with the Military Money Manual, a practical guide to financial freedom by Spencer Reese.
the Military Money Manual is available on Amazon, Audible, and my website in hardcover, paperback, ebook, Kindle, and audiobook. Podcast listeners are eligible for a special discount by using promo code PODCAST when they purchase the Military Money Manual on shop.militarymoneymanual.com.
Another thing you mentioned that email to us is the Diamond benefit about free breakfast or happy hour credit. Sometimes it's a dining credit where you can use it anywhere in the restaurant. Did you guys have any small success stories with using that throughout your honeymoon as well?
Yes, both Hilton properties we stayed at, we got free breakfast. So that was a win for sure. Because food on an island, especially an overwater bungalow island, isn't the cheapest of things. The fact that we got, the free full spread just from being a Diamond member really worked out in our favor. I actually did have a question for you too. Do you take the points or do you take the food vouchers every time you check in? Every time I never know what to do, and I just sit there and look like I don't know what they're talking about, but really I'm like doing the calculus real time in my head, and everyone's like, dude, just say something. Like, what are you doing? So what do you guys do?
I'll take it first and I'll let Jamie go. So I'll be honest, I haven't stayed in a US Hilton in quite some time, maybe like since COVID, maybe once or twice. And I usually just take the food voucher because like my wife and I will order room service or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Back when I was like TDY, like it was trickier because you might, have like the 3 a.m. alert and you're like, you guys pack something up for us ahead of time? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, whatever.
Yeah. And you're like, wait, does that go for my food voucher? Like, or should I just take the points? And the clerk is like, dude, I don't care. Just pick one.
Yeah. But I will say, so overseas, usually Hilton, it's just straight up free breakfast outside the US. And that's a no brainer. I'm going to take free breakfast every time. Even if I just go down, and I'm not a big breakfast guy. I'm usually like a cup of coffee, maybe a croissant if it's free. But, I'm not a big breakfast guy usually. So, but I'm still taking the free breakfast. Also, I've noticed overseas too, a lot of times it'll be like, cold continental buffet or whatever. And then the upgrade to like the full Monty with like the eggs and everything is like $5 or $10. So it's like, dude, just, live a little bit, splurge and get the hot eggs. So Because usually it's like 1,000 points, I think, is the offer.
It's never worth it to take points unless, like you said, you're gonna miss the meal from an early alert or early bus or whatever it is.
Same, unless I know I'm doing like a tourist activity where I'm leaving at 4 a.m. or having to catch a flight where I won't catch it, the meal time. But with the new flexible way that they do the dining credit model instead of free breakfast in a lot of hotels now, it is a little more flexible. Maybe you get a drink on your way up to the room or something like that. But the 1,000 points is nothing and not worth it. Even if I don't actually make it to breakfast, it's still probably more beneficial to try. But yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So I think the biggest lesson learned out of this whole year-long planning trip was if you have a big expense coming up, whether that's a wedding or buying a house or a car or, renovate a big renovation project or whatever it is, or, maybe you're lucky enough to buy a boat. I don't know what it is. Look into these reward credit cards, because then the wedding is just an easy one to then have a goal in mind, right? Because you guys have said multiple times, there's no point in accruing all these points if you have no plan for them, or retirement if you have no plan, right? This was very easy, and it was very like an attainable goal that we could do. And so that's the biggest lesson learned that I say is like, if you know you have something coming up, look into these points and really take advantage of what the MLA benefits are for the service members, as well as be ready to do your homework. In order to really pay for these, you're really going to have to do multiple search engines. And maybe I'm not smart enough to, do AI and have AI do it for me, but I spent multiple hours looking at different partner airlines and rewards and things like that, and then taking advantage of each card. So the free breakfast, the free night reward, all of those things, and knowing where you can transfer. And it became kind of a game for myself. And ultimately, my wife was just really happy that she got to take a honeymoon. Her only requisite was, Brian, can you plan the honeymoon? And I want to be on the beach. And so I said, copy, I can do that.
Yep.
And so as we were sitting there in Tahiti, on the beach with our personal pool, we were like, dude, this is awesome that we didn't pay for this, right? Or whatever flowers you wanted at your wedding actually ended up paying for this, which is something we'll remember. So it kind of definitely takes the sting out of some of those big purchases and big things. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, and don't be afraid to try it, right? I kind of hoard points, and so I was really afraid to like give Avianca Airlines 60,000 Amex points, but it all worked out, and you can always talk to them on the phone.
If you speak Spanish.
Yeah, that's true. They appreciated my college level Spanish 10 years later, I guess. It all worked out, and I'm really glad I can hopefully pass it on to who's ever listening, or even if just my wife listens to this, I know she'll be excited that we're telling other people about it. So.
That would be impressive, because my wife doesn't listen to these anymore. So
Yeah. If no one else is, Brian, we're proud of you, and we're excited to have like a listener story and success story on the show today, and just kind of recap how you did it. You transferred some of your Amex points to Avianca, and then you transferred some of your Chase points to United. You flew United round trip, but you had to book separate connections because starting in Houston and ending in Washington, D.C., you used Hilton points, you used free night certificates, and a little bit of cash on your hotel stay, and including food and some of the cash that you spent and paying for part of the trip back in cash. You spent less than $4,000, closer to around $3,000. And had you paid cash for everything, including your food, it would have been more like $9,000 or $10,000. So more than half off from your honeymoon. So probably time well invested for those that are wondering if it's worth it. And I'm guessing that the feelings that you guys had as newlyweds and being there on that overwater bungalow, that's something I've never done. Spencer and I have never done that. Maybe we will together, maybe with our wives one day. We've talked about it.
not for a honeymoon, Jamie.
No, what are we going to the mountains for our honeymoon? Is that the thing? You don't want to go to the beach? So nice job. And we appreciate you taking the time to lay it out, highlight the lessons learned, and to reach out to offer to share the story.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And thank you for the advice. I know I talked to you guys about newlyweds in the military and stuff, because the military loves to say how you should get married right away. But if, like a lot of people, you didn't, and then you're very established in your money habits, how do you combine that? So a lot of your guys' advice on what to check the MLA database, making sure you're all set up with the TSP and what you're invested in, like all of the things that aren't just sexy travel hacking. the nitty gritty of personal finance is awesome. And we need more education like this because, again, you only learn about it at the bar or, crossing the ocean or talking to someone that you have a good relationship with. I really appreciate what you guys do.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you paying it forward and, having those conversations with your coworkers and the people that you lead. The best way to affect change in the military is at the lowest level. If our CGOs and FGOs and NCOs and senior NCOs can have those conversations with their young airmen, soldiers, sailors, Marines, Guardians, Coast Guardsmen, we can really change some habits, I think. And I think there will always be the meme of the young Marine going out and buying the Dodge Charger at 28% interest. But we can maybe we can save one. And if we can save one, then it's all worth it.
Yeah. And I also think even if it's not a super sexy honeymoon, or if you're not honeymoon people, or that's not in the cards, there's a family reunion this summer and we pay for more than half of it on points. So it might not be a trip to Tahiti, but maybe it's a trip home to Thanksgiving for a couple days that you wouldn't else get paid for, if you use the points. That's my other plug to it. It's not always going to be some super sexy honeymoon or epic trip with your friends or something. It could just be a quick trip home to see a loved one that needs to be seen or something like that.
Oh, well said. Well said. Well, thanks, Brian, so much for joining us on the podcast. Listeners, if you got value out of it, 5-star review on Spotify or Apple is the best way to say thanks. And we'll catch you in the next episode of the Military Money Manual podcast.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Military Money Manual podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps others find the show, and we really appreciate it. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
The views and opinions presented here are those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views of the DoD or its components. Reference to any commercial products or services does not constitute DoD endorsement of those products or services.